There is a silent war that each one of us fights, a battle between appearing strong and truly being strong. And in this world that glorifies toughness, that praises invincibility, and that masks pain behind pride, very few dare to show their wounds. But let me ask you something today. What if your strength doesn't lie in hiding your tears, but in letting them fall? What if the courage you seek isn't found in building walls, but in tearing them down, brick by brick, exposing the raw, unfiltered, messy truth of who you really are? Vulnerability. That's a word we fear. And yet it is the most profound path to becoming truly powerful. Today, I want to take you on a journey where we explore what it really means to be vulnerable and why that very vulnerability may be the key to a strength so rare, so real, that no amount of armor can ever match it. Let's explore 4 powerful truths that uncover how vulnerability unlocks true strength. Vulnerability is the birthplace of authenticity. There comes a time in your journey when the weight of wearing a mask becomes heavier than the fear of being seen. You reach that silent breaking point where the echo of your own voice pretending to be fine becomes deafening. That moment, though terrifying, is your gateway to truth. And truth does not require makeup. It does not need stage lighting. It simply needs your courage to show up as you are. We live in a world that celebrates perfection, but forgets that perfection is often a lie we tell to feel enough. Somewhere between filtered smiles and rehearsed strength, we forget what it feels like to be human. We forget that it's okay to tremble, okay to not have the answers, and absolutely okay to admit that sometimes we're just tired of pretending. Authenticity doesn't demand you to be flawless, it invites you to be honest. The rawest form of strength is not the ability to never fall, but the bravery to say, I have fallen, but I'm still here. It takes so much more courage to expose your wounds than it does to hide them. Vulnerability is not weakness dressed in softness. It is strength draped in truth. And truth, when spoken without shame, has the power to shake every lie we've ever told ourselves. We often think we must earn love by showing our best selves, the highlight reels, the polished versions. But what if the real connection only begins when we allow someone to witness our darkness too? What if the most beautiful moments are those when we whisper, I'm not okay, and someone looks us in the eye and replies, you don't have to be? That is when walls crumble and hearts finally breathe. Authenticity is not a final destination. It's a daily decision. Every morning you wake up and decide whether to be brave enough to let the world see you, or to hide once more beneath layers of, I'm fine. But with each choice, to be seen, to be heard, to be real, you return home to yourself a little more. And the truth is, nothing in the world feels safer than being at home in your own soul. There's a sacred kind of power in being able to say, this is me, without apology. To stop editing your identity for the sake of acceptance. To stop trimming your truth for the comfort of others. You are not a resume. You are not a script. You are a living, breathing, evolving story. And your vulnerability is what makes that story worth reading. The moment you stop performing, you start living. Life doesn't ask you to be impressive, it asks you to be present. When you remove the costume of perfection, you begin to hear your real voice again. You begin to feel emotions that were buried under expectations. And slowly you start to trust the person beneath the mask. People often admire strength, but connect with struggle. We think we must be superheroes to be loved. But in reality, it's our humanity that makes us lovable. No one can relate to your perfection. But millions can relate to your brokenness, your doubt, your fear, and still see your beauty through it all. The most authentic people aren't the ones who always get it right. They're the ones who are not afraid to admit when they've gotten it wrong. They own their shadows. They don't hide behind shame. They wear their truth like armor, not because they want to be praised, but because they refuse to live a lie any longer. You'll find freedom the day you stop hiding the parts of you that hurt. You'll find peace the moment you allow your soul to speak without censorship, because what you've been through, what you've felt, what you've overcome, these are not stains on your story. They're signatures of survival. And survival, in its truest form, is authenticity. We wait too long to be real. We wait for the perfect moment, the right people, the safest environment. But vulnerability isn't about timing, it's about choice. A choice to be bold enough to say, I will not shrink to fit into spaces that don't celebrate my truth. A choice to stop negotiating your identity for temporary validation. The world needs more voices that speak from the heart and less echoes that repeat what is expected. Your authenticity may make some uncomfortable, but that is only because they're not ready to face their own. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be aligned with your own soul. And that begins where vulnerability lives. Stop fearing the mirror. Your reflection is not your enemy. Every scar has a story. Every tear has a truth. And every imperfection is evidence that you have felt deeply, lived fully, and dared greatly. Vulnerability is not the enemy of strength, it is its origin. When you live authentically, you no longer chase strength. You become it. It is in the quiet admission of your truth that the loudest transformation occurs. No more hiding. No more performing. No more trying to impress a world that doesn't know your journey. Start where you are. Use what you have. Feel what you feel. Speak what you know. And let vulnerability guide you back to the most powerful thing you'll ever be, yourself. Being open allows healing to begin. There are wounds that don't bleed, and yet they ache with a silence so loud, it drowns every smile we try to wear. We walk around carrying invisible bruises that no one can see because we've mastered the art of hiding them behind busy schedules, polite laughter, and surface-level conversations. But healing doesn't live in the shadows. It begins the moment we stop whispering to ourselves in shame and start speaking in the open. You cannot heal what you continue to hide. The heart cannot exhale if it's suffocated by secrets. There is no peace in pretending. There is only postponement of the inevitable breakdown. True healing doesn't knock on your door in the middle of strength. It finds you when you're tired of being strong for everyone else and finally admit that you're not okay, not even a little bit. When you open up, even just a crack, you let air into a space that's been suffocating. You let light reach the places where darkness had built its home. That openness isn't weakness, it's permission. Permission for your soul to speak. Permission for your tears to tell the story your smile couldn't. Permission for you to be human again. We're taught that strength means endurance. That if we just hold on, keep going, keep silent, we'll survive. But survival without healing is just a delayed kind of pain. It waits for you in your quiet moments, in your dreams, in your stillness. Healing starts when you no longer wish to survive silently but choose to live freely. There is a sacred power in saying, "This hurt me," not for attention, not for pity, but because acknowledgement is the first breath of healing. Naming your pain doesn't make you a victim. It makes you a survivor with a voice. And voices were never meant to stay buried. Being open is not about telling the world everything. It's about telling the truth to yourself first. Because self-betrayal is the deepest cut. When you silence your pain for too long, you start to believe you deserve it. But you don't. You never did. And the moment you allow your own heart to feel heard, you begin to remember that healing is not a straight path. It's messy, it's layered. Some days you'll feel strong, other days you'll break again over something you thought you had already healed. But that's not failure, it's process. And the only way through that process is to stay open, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's scary. You may think that holding it all in protects you, but in reality, it isolates you. It separates you from every soul who could have held your hand through the storm. Vulnerability doesn't just connect us to healing, it connects us to each other. When you share your truth, you build a bridge for others to walk out of their silence too. It is through being open that we dissolve shame, because shame thrives in secrecy. The more you hide, the heavier it gets. But when you speak your truth, shame loses its power. It cannot survive the light. And once shame begins to fade, what's left behind is clarity, peace, and a heart that finally knows how to breathe again. Being open teaches you compassion for yourself. Because when you hear your own pain out loud, you realize just how much you've endured. You begin to stop blaming yourself for your trauma You stop questioning your worthiness. You stop asking if you're too sensitive, too emotional, too broken. You begin to understand that you were always simply human. It's okay to not have it together. It's okay to be in pieces. And it's okay to say it out loud. Healing doesn't require you to have answers. It just requires your truth. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be felt. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to sit with your own story and say, this happened and I survived it. Opening up invites the right kind of people into your life, the ones who don't run from your mess but pull up a chair beside it. The ones who say, you don't need to be whole for me to love you. Those people exist, but you will never find them if you're too busy pretending to be unbroken. You don't need many, just the honest few who see your truth and stay somewhere someone is silently suffering the same way you are, thinking they're alone. And your courage to open up might be the light they were searching for. Vulnerability is a ripple. When you drop it into the water, it spreads. It doesn't just heal you. It invites others to heal too. Because healing is never meant to be a lonely path. Healing begins when you decide to stop hiding the parts of yourself you think no one will understand. It begins when you give yourself permission to be seen even in your rawest, most wounded state. You will never be too much for the right healing. And the right healing starts the moment you stop shrinking to fit inside silence. There is no shame in your pain. There is no guilt in your grief. And there is no weakness in your openness. There is only the strength of a soul that has chosen to rise to truth. You don't need to be fearless to be open. You just need to be tired enough of carrying the weight alone. And when that moment comes, healing will meet you right where you are. Vulnerability builds deeper connections. There's a certain kind of silence that exists between people when both are trying to appear strong. A distance wrapped in pride, painted with smiles but hollow on the inside. We sit beside each other, exchange pleasantries but never hearts. We touch lives without touching souls. And slowly, the ache of loneliness grows even in crowded rooms because we're not being real, we're just performing connection. But real connection doesn't happen through perfection. It doesn't happen when you show up with your best version. It happens when you show up with your truest one. When you stop rehearsing your responses and start speaking from your wounds, you give someone else the courage to say, me too. That moment is when hearts truly meet. We often fear that if people saw the real us, they'd walk away. That if they knew the chaos behind our composure, the tears behind our strength, the stories behind our smiles, they would run. And yet, the most meaningful relationships are born when we dare to take that risk. Vulnerability is the doorway that allows someone to step into your world and choose to stay anyway. There's nothing more comforting than being understood without having to explain everything. And that kind of understanding only happens when both people are brave enough to be seen. You don't build closeness by sharing victories, you build it by sharing battles. By saying, I've been there, not just I've moved on from there. That's how empathy is born. You were not created to go through life alone, but no one can walk beside you if you keep building walls. Every time you open up, you tear a brick down. And yes, some may not know what to do with your honesty. Some may leave, but those who stay, those are your people. And the only way to find them is to stop hiding. It's in the small moments of openness that deep connection begins. A trembling voice saying, I'm scared too. A late night message saying, I needed to hear that. A quiet confession of past pain shared over coffee between pauses. These moments don't scream for attention, but they echo for years in the hearts they touch. When you're vulnerable, you're not just inviting someone into your story, you're inviting them to write new chapters with you. You're saying, I trust you with my truth. That trust becomes the seed of loyalty. That honesty becomes the foundation of something unbreakable. And that risk becomes the reward of real intimacy. There is a difference between being liked and being loved. You can be liked for what you show, but you are loved for what you reveal. When someone knows your cracks and still chooses your light, you experience a kind of connection that surface-level conversations can never give. That kind of love sees the worst in you and stays anyway. Many of us have been hurt before, and so we become cautious, we build walls, we tell ourselves we're protecting our peace. But what we're really doing is protecting our pain. And pain, when kept hidden, only multiplies. When you finally find the courage to be seen even while shaking, that's when healing through connection begins. You deserve relationships where you don't have to second guess your worth, where you can be quiet and still feel heard, where you can be broken and still feel whole. Those kinds of relationships don't require perfection, they require vulnerability, and they begin when you decide to show up without your mask. Stop waiting to be loved for who you are while hiding who you are. People can't love the parts of you they never get to see. And they won't know how to hold your truth unless you give them the chance to. Vulnerability is the gift you give not just to others, but to yourself. The gift of being loved in your entirety. It's easy to connect when everything is fine, but real connection is tested when things fall apart. When you fall apart, and it's in those moments when your soul feels naked, that the people who truly care will step forward, not to fix you, but to sit with you, hold space for you, and remind you that your brokenness isn't too much. When you're vulnerable, you create space for others to show up, not just as friends, but as mirrors. They reflect back to you your strength, your courage, your beauty, even when you've forgotten it. And in doing so, you remind each other that you're never truly alone, even in your loneliest hours. The irony of vulnerability is that what we fear will push people away is often what draws them closer. The moment you stop pretending is the moment others feel safe enough to stop pretending too. And in that mutual surrender, you find the most powerful kind of connection, one that doesn't need validation, doesn't demand explanation, and doesn't fear imperfection. So many people are starving for realness, tired of conversations that only scratch the surface, hungry for connections that go deeper than likes and replies. Vulnerability is how we get there. It's how we create spaces where people feel seen, heard, and held not despite their flaws, but because of them in the end. There comes a time in your journey when you realize strength was never about how tightly you held yourself together, it was about how bravely you allowed yourself to fall apart. And in that falling, in that surrender, in that raw unveiling of all that you are, you uncover a version of yourself that doesn't need to be louder to be heard or harder to be respected. You find a strength that isn't built in the absence of fear, but one that is born in the heart of it. We spend so much time hiding what hurts, thinking it protects us, thinking it makes us untouchable. But all it really does is build a cage where our truth sits quietly, waiting to be acknowledged. Vulnerability is the key that unlocks that cage. It doesn't set us free because we're fixed. It sets us free because we are finally honest. True strength is not the absence of emotion, it's the presence of courage in the middle of every emotion. It's showing up in your truth when silence feels safer. It's letting your soul speak when your mind begs you to retreat. It's sharing your story not when it's perfect, but while it's still unfolding. That is not weakness. That is the rarest form of power. You are never meant to be untouched by pain. You were never meant to walk through life unscarred. The marks on your heart, the cracks in your soul, the ache behind your smile, they are not signs that you've failed, they are evidence that you've lived. And in living, you've learned that there's nothing more powerful than standing in your truth, fully seen, fully felt, and still rising. Vulnerability is not your enemy. It is your compass. It leads you back to the most sacred place of all, yourself. The version of you that is no longer performing. The version of you that is no longer shrinking. The version of you that can finally breathe because the mask is gone and what remains is real. So let the world call it fragile. Let them call it foolish. Let them say you're too soft, too sensitive, too open. But never forget steel may not bend, but it breaks. Water, though soft, carves through stone. And your softness, your openness, your courage to feel deeply, to connect boldly, to live vulnerably, will shape the world around you in ways toughness never could. The path of vulnerability is not easy, but it is pure. It is brave. It is transformative. And each time you walk it, you take others with you. You create space for healing. You invite truth to sit down. You give permission for others to be exactly who they are. And that ripple, quiet as it may be, is how strength begins to spread. Your vulnerability is not the opposite of strength. It is its birthplace. It is where the strongest love is born, where the deepest healing begins, where the most unshakable connections are built, and where you meet yourself fully, gently, and without shame for the very first time.